Hey, Shanna here. Welcome to my channel, all about finding joy while learning to live well with autoimmune disease. I am so glad to have you here. So today I am doing AIP Q&A. So a couple weeks ago I shared my updated Hashimoto story and kind of where I was at with the way that I eat, the AIP Autoimmune Protocol, where I'm at with like reintros and stuff. And so on my stories that day, I opened it up and I said, hey, let me know if you have any questions on either my Hashimoto story or my AIP journey, and I'll do a YouTube video on with like a Q&A. So last week I published the Hashimoto's Q&A. So if you missed that and you're interested, I'll link that down below. And then today I'm doing the AIP Q&A. So I am answering your questions that I received on Instagram about the AIP. I have not looked at these ahead of time. I just saw that there was a lot of questions and I thought it would be fun if we just read them together and I answer them. Okay, and I think I'll just take these in the order. Oh my gosh, there's a lot. Okay, I got this. Okay, at what point did you feel comfortable, ready to reintroduce foods back in? Oh, day one? No, I'm just kidding. I did not feel ready to reintroduce. Well, I knew I wasn't ready, but I wanted to be ready day one. I did a video on, it's been a while, but I shared my original reintro experience and what I did wrong. And I need to do an updated one because things have gone a lot better since then. But so I won't go like full on into it, but I'll link that video below if you want to watch. The AIP Elimination Phase, as a general rule of thumb, it's recommended to be on it a minimum of 30 to 90 days. And I thought for sure I was going to be a 30-dayer. I'm like 30 days and done. And that's so not how it happened. But keep in mind that all of us are different. And so I'm sharing my experience. You may have a totally different experience. The AIP is a template, like it's not a one size fits all template. It's a great starting point, but there's so many things to, there's so many ins and outs of AIP. There's so many things that go into troubleshooting it. And so if you're like, well, I'm doing what it says, why isn't this working? Like, you're not alone. There's a lot more to it. I started my 30-day AIP group coaching program because there's so many ins and outs of it, and there's so many things that we can do for troubleshooting and for fine-tuning. And so just know that if you're feeling that way, it's okay. You're not alone. I'm going to tell you how long I ended up being on elimination phase, but just know that I was at my rock bottom when I started AIP. I had a lot of gut healing to work on. I had a lot of nutrient deficiencies to work on. I was on elimination phase for 10 months. So I say it like 10 months, but it wasn't. The first 30 to 45 days were the hardest for me. After that, like, things just got easier. My taste buds started to change. My cravings started to ease up, and I started to realize that when I eat this way, I feel so much better. I feel so great, and I can rebuild my life into something so beautiful. Like, to me, nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. Like, I was able to start traveling again. I was able to watch my son's baseball games again. I was able to do so much again. And so it became, I say, like, I was on the elimination phase for 10 months, not because I have an issue with it, but because I don't want to scare you away from trying AIP, because it has been 100% worth it. And just keep in mind too that you don't have to go all in 100% AIP all at once. You can transition to it. So anyways, when at that 10-month mark, I felt comfortable and I felt ready. Like, okay, like, I'm not reintroducing foods for the wrong reasons. I'm reintroducing foods because I feel ready to add in nutrient-dense whole foods that can help me in my healing journey. And so it wasn't coming from a place where, oh my gosh, I can't take this. I need all the foods again. And it wasn't like that. It was like a healthy thing. And at that point, my reintroductions went a lot better. Okay, so let's take another question. How long until it becomes routine? I fell off the wagon after 2.5 months and need to get back into it. I have a lot of questions about that question, actually. Like, were you 2.5 months, like, strict, no cheating, elimination phase? Or was it kind of like, I like the 80-20 thing, like, well, I eat AIP 80% of the time. So I'm kind of curious too, did you see an improvement in your symptoms? If whoever asked this can email me a little bit more information, I can do a standalone video that kind of dives into this more, that talks about I do have a video and a blog post, what to do when you cheat on the AIP. So I will link that down below. So, but if that doesn't answer your question, I would love to take a deep dive into this. So if you want to email me, like more specifics, like if you saw an improvement in your symptoms, is it like what about it was the hardest? I would say by 2.5 months, it was pretty routine for me, but that was 100% AIP, and I worked heavily on mindset and habits. And so I often find that mindset and our habits and lifestyle are so important when it comes to AIP. So many people start AIP and they're just so hyper focused on the food, and they're forgetting like the lifestyle side of it. Like if you're so hyper focused on what to exclude, that's gonna stress you out, right? And that can make you feel worse. Like stress can be very detrimental to health and wellness, especially when it comes to autoimmune health and wellness. And so it's really important that as we start AIP, that I find it's really important that when I work with my clients, when I do my group coaching program, that I emphasize heavily mindset and lifestyle, and starting it in a loving way, meaning that probably sounds weird, but like starting it with ease, approaching it with ease instead of like rigidity, like this is how it has to be. Like that's probably not going to help anybody, you know? And so, yeah, let me know more info about this, and then I can do like a standalone video, kind of using this situation and kind of explaining my thoughts on it and how I would approach it, generally speaking, from like a coaching standpoint. All right, so let's move along to the next question. I am having a hard time recognizing if I am reacting to foods when introducing. Okay, such a good question. So before reintroducing foods, I find it's really important that you have some sort of baseline. So even if you're not like 100% symptom free, as long as you've seen an improvement in your symptoms and you kind of like have a baseline. And then the other thing to be really mindful of when you're reintroducing foods is lifestyle. So it's really important that you are prioritizing sleep, that you are managing stress, that you are moving in a way that feels best for your body, because sometimes when somebody tries to reintroduce a food, they may have a symptom pop back up or a reaction, and they can't tell if it's from the food or if it's from a lack of sleep or if it's from stress, or sometimes they're so quick to assume it's the food that's causing the reaction. Meanwhile, they haven't slept in 3 nights because of some stressful event. So it may not, so the symptom or symptoms popping up may have nothing to do with the food that you reintroduced. Maybe those green beans that you reintroduced, your body loves, and you know, and it's a good, successful reintro, but maybe it's the lack of sleep or the overwhelming stress or the crazy intense workout that you did that's causing those symptoms to pop back up. So that's the first thing that I want to say, is that it's really important to keep in mind that it's that autoimmune health and our symptoms are not all to do with food. It's not only to do with what we put in our mouth. It's also how we live and how we think. If we're, you know, constantly beating ourselves up, that's not healthy, right? And so we need to work on self-love and understanding the importance of self-care and understanding the importance of the way that we talk to ourselves and making sure that those things are in check. So I wanted to say that, but I'm not sure that's exactly what this person is asking. She's saying that she's having a hard time recognizing if she's reacting to foods. And so my other big tip with this is to keep a detailed food, mood, and lifestyle journal. So in other words, you're going to get, I actually have a template that you can download for free. I'll link it. So if you want to use that, you can, or you can just look at it and create your own, like on your laptop or your computer or your phone, or you can just like handwrite it down, whatever floats your boat. So, but that can be really good because then the idea is that you write down everything you put into your mouth. So anything you put into your mouth, even if it's just one bite, you write it down, You write down the times, you write down how much water you're drinking, what your hydration's like. Keep in mind you want to aim to drink at least half your body weight in ounces of water each day. Keep in mind bio-individuality. You're also going to write down how much you slept that night. You're going to write down your bowel movements, what type of bowel movements they are on the Bristol scale ideally. You're going to write down what movement you did. You're going to write down your energy, if you were, had good energy levels throughout the day, if you had an afternoon crash in energy, if you are really cranky and moody and short with people, that can be a reaction. Like that's one of my first reactions when something's off is I get really short with my husband. And now I tell my husband, hey, can you tell me when I get like that? Because sometimes we're so busy, we just think, oh, it's just, we have something stressful going on. That's why I'm being impatient, or that's why I'm being short. And hey, maybe it's as innocent as that, but maybe it's an early warning sign, meaning something's off. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself, and other symptoms start showing up. And so keep track of like how you're feeling too. Like if you're happy or if you're moody, you've got these crazy mood swings going on. And then also keep track of any symptoms. And so I encourage you, go ahead and do that for a number of days, especially when you're reintroducing foods. Also, make sure that you're going through the reintroduction process. I do teach a lot about the reintroduction in my AIP 30-day program, and I have a reintro guide. I haven't done like an official reintro process video. But I will say that Eileen Laird at Phoenix Helix has some great resources on the reintroduction process. And I will get the reintroduction process video in the works so that I can have that for you guys. But make sure that you're going through that process, and then that should be easier to identify if you're having a reaction to that certain food. That's why there's a recommended process, so that it's easier to identify what's causing what. And then that in conjunction with the food, mood, and lifestyle journal, you can notice patterns in that journal. Like, okay, I reintroduced this food and then I had this kind of a digestive reaction that day or the next day, or I reintroduced this food and I was moody. I reintroduced this food and I had an energy crash, and I usually have pretty steady energy. I reintroduced this food and man, I felt great still, that I had no reaction. Or I reintroduced this food and I had this reaction, but hey, look, I didn't sleep good the night before. I'm gonna try this again next week. I'm gonna try to reintroduce that food next week when I get my sleep back in check, and that way I can see if that pops up again, then I know it's probably because of the food. If it doesn't pop up again, then it was probably because of my lack of sleep. So I know that there's so many ins and outs of reintroducing foods, and as you go through the process, you'll become more and more in tune with your body, especially, like I said, if you're keeping that journal. And so I just encourage you to continue listening to your body and just keep trying. I know it's a hard process at first, but learning to listen to your body is going to be so instrumental when it comes to finding joy as you learn to live well with autoimmune disease. Okay, so let's take another question. How long do you stay on AIP if you have autoimmune disease? Why stop reintroduce foods? Okay, awesome question. So there's a couple different questions here. How long do you stay on AIP? Again, it's going to look differently for different people. And so generally speaking, the AIP Elimination Phase, and if you want to see a video just on the elimination phase, I'll link one down below. I did one a few weeks ago. But generally speaking, it's recommended to stay on the elimination phase a minimum of 30 to 90 days. Like I mentioned earlier, I was on it for a lot longer, but I was but I was in a pretty bad spot when I started, and I had a lot to work on. All right, and then the other part of the question was, if you have autoimmune disease, why stop reintroduce foods? Okay, such a good question. So one of the ideas of the Autoimmune Protocol is that it temporarily eliminates the foods that trigger our immune system. So there's other things to it, and I'll link my elimination phase video where I explain a lot more about why the AIP. So I recommend watching that. And then after that period of elimination, we systematically reintroduce the foods so that it's easier to tell like what foods we react to, what foods trigger our symptoms, And having that period of elimination and then reintroduction, it's a lot more clear cut. For more like the science behind the autoimmune protocol, I highly recommend Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, the paleo approach. I also really love Dr. Datis Kharrazian. He has some amazing resources as well. Also, Dr. Kharrazian, he was on Eileen at Helix, her podcast last month or the month before, and he talked about oral intolerance and the AIP and an elimination diet. And so I highly recommend listening to that. I will link that down below. So let's do another question. How do you rotate foods and make sure to eat different things, especially batch cooking? Okay, awesome question. My favorite method to do this is really simple. And I share this in my simple AIP meal planning video. I'll link that if you haven't seen it. But basically, if you're new to the AIP, I recommend doing this, is taking a look at the list of AIP foods to include and to make a list of your favorite AIP proteins, not just like chicken, but like chicken thighs, boneless chicken thighs, drumsticks, whole chicken, chicken breasts, chicken wings, like all the different cuts of meat too, like grass-fed ground beef, grass-fed ribeye steaks, like all, like not just beef, and then not just like wild-caught seafood, but all the types of wild-caught fish that you like. And then make a list of your favorite kind of AIP veggies, and then make a list of your favorite AIP healthy fats and your favorite AIP fruits. And so now you have this like huge list of all of these AIP nutrient dense healing foods that you can choose from, and then just kind of build your meals from that and just rotate. So that's what I found to be my favorite way of doing things. I am not a big meal planner or batch cooker. I say that, but with that said, a rule of thumb I always do is I always try to double or triple a recipe, so that, I mean, I guess you can call it batch cooking, but when I'm making a meal for my family, I go ahead and double it or triple it. That way I portion out and save the leftovers either in my fridge or in my freezer. And then also, as far as veggies, thinking about how many different colors of veggies can you eat in a day. So like if you're building a salad or if you're building a plate, a dinner plate, like how many different colors of veggies can you eat? That can be helpful. Also different varieties, so like switching up the type of sweet potatoes you use, like sometimes using Japanese sweet potatoes, sometimes using white sweet potatoes, sometimes using the garnet yams. As far as like onions, like sweet onions and red onions, so like there's so many different kinds of mushrooms to choose from. So I really like thinking about the different varieties of the same type of veggie, as well as the different veggies. Another thing that I'll say about this too is I found it's really important to keep trying new veggies. So before AIP, I don't know, I think my family and I only ate like a few different types of veggies, and it was always like the same. Now my kids get excited, like they'll be at the store and they're like, hey mom, look at this, what's this, can we try this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like I don't know what it is, I don't know how to cook it, but I don't know how to pronounce it, but let's try it. As many veggies as we've tried, there's still veggies that we're still trying. For example, one pretty common vegetable, I think it's pretty popular, that we just hadn't tried as a family, was artichokes. Like I didn't know how to make them. They look kind of scary to me. They're kind of seem weird. Before AIP, give me all of the spinach and artichoke dip. Like give it to me, I love it. But after AIP, I'm like, oh, that's an artichoke? And so I recently bought some a few weeks ago, and it turns out it is one of our family's favorite vegetables. Not only does it taste so good, they're really easy to make, you guys. And I think they win the award for the funnest vegetable to eat. I think they're so fun to eat. My whole point is wherever you're at, you don't have to try all the veggies all at once. You know, like here I am 2.5 years later, well into my reintro maintenance phase, and I'm still trying new veggies. So think of this as like a long-term life journey. You have plenty of time. And I will say this, that if you're new to AIP, yes, it's important to get a variety, but sometimes it's important just to keep it simple and just to find a few AIP dishes that you love first, and then build on that. I know that that's what I did, and that's what I needed. So in my first like week or 2 or 3, I ate a lot of the same foods because I looked at that AIP list for the first time. I'm like, huh? What am I gonna eat? Like, are you kidding me right now? And then I learned to like slowly find things that I liked and that I could eat. And as I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned earlier, like taste buds change. And so now I love all the veggies. Bring me all the AIP foods. I love them. So let's do another question. AIP Compliant Supplements. Okay, so I talked about supplements in my Hashimoto's Q&A last week, so I'm not going to go there. So my biggest recommendation is just to be sure that you read the label on any supplements that you're taking, because I know for me, even though my naturopath that I was working with at the time when I started AIP, even though she recommended like AIP foods, like she didn't call it AIP, but she gave me like a foods list, and I later found out it was AIP, or pretty close to AIP, and then I adopted AIP. But even though she was the one that gave me the foods list, she had me on supplements that had ingredients that were not AIP compliant. I felt that the supplements that she had me on were really, that I was not doing well on them. And so just a heads up to make sure that you're reading your supplements. Like a common ingredient that is not AIP, that is in like a supplement for like adrenal support or blood sugar regulation, is ashwagandha, and that's not AIP. That's one of the most common ones I can think of. And then of course, you just want to make sure that you are not taking any supplements with any like ingredients that shouldn't be in a supplement, you know, that you're taking a good quality supplement. And again, I talk about this in my video from last week, but I don't give out general supplement recommendations, even though I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and I go over all the reasons why in my last video, which I'll link down below. Okay, next question. How did you know to try AIP versus paleo? Okay, awesome question. And as I mentioned, my naturopath gave me a list of foods to include and exclude based on my Hashimoto's diagnosis. And so I started it, and I looked in, it didn't have like a name on it or a label, so I looked into it, and then I found the Autoimmune Protocol. So I started the Autoimmune Protocol based on a recommendation from my naturopath. What some people do is they start gluten-free, and then they go paleo, and then they see how they do. And if they do great on paleo, they'll just like stop there, like, awesome, I'm on paleo. Because really you don't want to exclude more foods than you need to. It's really, really good to get a variety of nutrient-dense whole foods. And so if you cut like the processed foods, if you cut like the sugar, if you cut like the gluten, if you cut like the artificial ingredients, and you're feeling great, then that's awesome. If you're like, I'm still having symptoms, then you could always transition into paleo. And then if you're still having symptoms paleo, you can go Autoimmune Protocol. But transitioning to the Autoimmune Protocol and then seeing if you get to a point where you don't need to go further, that totally works. All right, let's do another question. Books, websites, YouTubers that you found helpful learning about and starting AIP. Oh, funny story, you guys. Okay, so I literally started AIP with just that list of foods from my naturopath, and that's it. So I think that's really funny now because I don't know anybody else. I think I've met one other person online who started that way. Everybody else I've met is like so on top of things. They've like read books about AIP, or they've like read articles, or they've watched videos about AIP, and they're ready to go. And that was like so not me. Like all I knew was that I felt horrible, I lost a life that I once knew, and I had this list of foods to include and exclude, and I was willing to try anything, so I tried it. With that said, I wasn't even on social media at the time. I had been off of social media for a lot of months because I was so unwell and I couldn't do things, and I couldn't handle seeing everybody else's highlight reels. So yeah, I didn't know there's like a whole AIP online community. Oh, that would have been so nice, and I would have felt so much less alone. So anyways, books, websites, YouTubers. I really love Eileen at Helix. She has a simple guide to the Autoimmune Protocol. I didn't find her right away. I first found Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, who wrote the Paleo Approach, and I used some of her resources. Websites, so she has a website, thepaleomom.com. Eileen's is phoenixhelix.com. There are so many AIP bloggers out there. I One of my favorite recipe AIP bloggers is Michelle at Unbound Wellness. Her recipes are incredible. She has a cookbook that is awesome, the Autoimmune Protocol Comfort Foods Cookbook. I will link that down below, as well as my other favorite AIP cookbook is the Healing Kitchen. And then podcasts. Oh no, they didn't ask for podcasts. YouTubers. So Michelle Spring at Thriving on Paleo. Love her. Stacy at World AIP. Love Stacy. She has some great ones. Adam at Autoimmune also has some AIP videos. I did an AIP troubleshooting video with him. So yeah, there's so many resources. As far as podcasts, Phoenix Helix is a great podcast. You know, I didn't read a lot of AIP resources at the beginning. Like, I kind of knew what the basics were. I mainly focus on my mindset and my habits. And so I mentioned this in the video last week, but one book I loved was Atomic Habits, and it's by James Clear. It has nothing to do with AIP, but I used his tips for changing my habits that helped me adopt AIP. And then I also love the podcast Increase Your Impact by Justin Sua. Again, not AIP, but really great as far as like self-improvement and personal growth. And I just take what I learned there and apply it to my wellness journey. Okay, let's do another question. Talk about how you have such a positive attitude and how you always find joy in your life. Oh, that is, Becky, that's a good question. Okay. I don't stop to think about it. So, and I did not read this ahead of time, so I'm trying to process and see what's the first thing that comes to mind. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is faith. I think for a long time, I felt like my challenges were because, this is gonna sound maybe crazy to you, but it is what it is, so I'm just gonna say it. That I had done something wrong and that I was being punished, and that's why I was having challenges. For example, I stutter. I stuttered horribly as a child. I never grew out of it. I still stutter. As you can tell, I learned to speak fluently most of the time. And it was a painful experience. And I open up a lot about it on a recent podcast I did about stuttering for the Stuttering Mind podcast. And I actually talk about autoimmune disease in that too. So I will link that if you want to listen to it, if you're curious about my stuttering journey, or my stuttering history, or where I'm at now with my stuttering, or if you know somebody who stutters, please share that. And I talk about how I have a positive attitude. So I bring up stuttering because for most of my life, half of my life, I'm getting older now. I felt, until I was in my mid-20s, or maybe early 20s, I felt like God didn't love me as much, and maybe that's why I stuttered, or that I had done something wrong and he was punishing me. And it took me, and I don't know that I consciously thought that, but I felt that inside. And so it took me time to understand that I wasn't being punished with stuttering, that God didn't love me less because I stuttered, that I believe that we're all children of God, and that my Heavenly Father, that God gave me the experience of stuttering in order to learn and to grow and to become the woman that he would have me be. And that everything I learned through the experience of stuttering, not for a long time, but eventually helped me become more empathetic, more understanding, more loving, more patient. And as painful as it was, and as much as I hated that part of me, it's hard to explain to somebody what it feels like to not be able to say what you want to say, to be able to have words and ideas and thoughts and not be able to physically get them out of your mouth. And I don't take for granted what I do now. If you had told me years ago that I would change careers and devote my life to speaking out about autoimmune disease and speaking out about how to live well with autoimmune disease, I would have said, you are crazy. No way am I going to speak publicly about that. No way will I ever share that I stuttered. In fact, when I started sharing my story, I was terrified of anybody finding out that I stutter, or that I have the history of stuttering that I have, because I thought nobody will want to hear what I have to say. Nobody will want me on their podcast. Nobody will want to watch my videos. And so I hid, even as much as I found peace with stuttering in my early 20s, my mid 20s, I hid that part of me until just a couple months ago. And this incredible person who has this podcast, this stuttering podcast that I was on, he had previously invited me to be on his stuttering podcast, and I was terrified. I was like, no, like I'm not. And then I changed my mind and I was on his podcast, and I have to say it was one of the most freeing things I've done, is to speak out and say, yeah, I stutter. Yeah, I have a horrible history of stuttering. And that's okay. I have nothing to be ashamed of. It's a part of me. And as much as it was an ugly part of my story, or I felt it was, I now think it's a beautiful part of my story. I wouldn't be who I am today without that experience. And so I think I share this. If you're like, come on, Shanna, we're talking AIP, autoimmune disease. What's your deal? Why are you sharing this? I'm sharing this because as I read that question, I think my stuttering experience taught me so much and helped me in my autoimmune experience. I found when I learned to find positivity there, I learned to find positivity here. Also, I just want you to know that I have not always been this positive about Hashimoto's, about my autoimmune story, about AIP. At my rock bottom, I was in a dark place. I had anxiety. I had quite a few issues, and like emotionally with what was going on. I had a lot of shame. I spent years hiding my symptoms. I can imagine when my family and friends found out that what was going on, they were like, really? Like, I had no idea. I'm guessing they had no idea because that's how much I hid it. And so going from anger and bitterness, I think first of all, I had to turn around and look those feelings in the eye and be like, yeah, I feel this way. And I think I had a hard time with that because I am a religious person and a faithful person, and I think subconsciously I felt like I shouldn't be feeling those things, that wasn't Christ-like. And I think that I had to realize that nobody's perfect and that it's okay to feel those feelings, and that I had to allow myself to feel those feelings and able to work through them, and in order to move past them. And so how did I move past them? How did I work through them? I'd say gratitude. I started a gratitude practice. So every day writing things down that I am thankful for. Some of these things I'm sharing, I go through in my AIP group coaching program, but gratitude, daily journal, gratitude practice, daily victories journal, where you write down things that you did that day that you can be proud of, even if you are at your rock bottom and cannot function. What else helped me? Learning to communicate, learning to say, I am not well. I can't do that. And learning to say, I need to go rest. And learning how to allow myself to do that. It's hard. It's hard. Learning, as far as food, thinking about it in terms of what I can eat versus what I can't. Focusing on the foods to include versus the foods to exclude. Keeping in mind that this way of eating and living enables me to do the things that I love to do, to be able to do the things that make my heart happy. When I get in a flare, when I have symptoms pop up, I still have negative feelings come up. I am not always positive. And first I try to fight them, and that never has worked for me. Let me know if fighting those feelings has ever worked for anybody, because it's never worked for me. So at first I always try to fight it. And then I realized, it's okay to feel those things. That doesn't make me bad. That makes me human. And then I start working again on getting back to the basics, gratitude, realizing that I've gotten through flares before. I've gotten through my rock bottom. I can get through this. A lot of living with autoimmunity is a lot of fear, right? Like, we don't know when a flare pops up. Sometimes we don't know what caused it. Sometimes we don't know if it's getting worse, how worse it's going to get, how long it's going to last, if we're going to be able to get through this. And so reminding myself that I can get through this again, and that it's going to be okay, and that I think clinging to my faith a lot helps too. So anyways, that was probably a little bit heavy. But it is what it is, and that's how I've been able to find joy, is to not pretend like everything's okay. It's not okay. It's not fair. And I can find joy anyway. And I think realizing too, I remember when I first realized that I let Hashimoto steal my joy, I let it steal my laughter, and I never want to get back there again. And so even when I may get down or have a down day or a down week now, I realize that, hey, I can still laugh no matter how my body feels. I can still find joy no matter how my body feels. I can still find things to be grateful for. I can still remember a growth mindset that this is happening for me. I am not a victim. This is not happening to me. This is happening for me. I can learn and grow and progress and become a better person because of this experience. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so next question is, can you share a success story with someone who finally AIP'd after a couple start and stops? Such a good question. Yeah, so I actually had some people in my recent 30-day AIP program who had tried to start AIP a number of times, and it was just too hard. And so I was able to help coach them through that, which was amazing, rewarding. It would be, I would need like more details to share with you, like the ins and outs of their story. But I recently decided that it'd be fun if I highlight a success story, either like a Hashimoto success story or an AIP success story. So I'm going to start sharing an AIP or Hashimoto's success story at least once a month, and the information access to that will be through my email newsletter. So I send out a weekly free AIP Hashimoto's autoimmune newsletter. And so if you are on my list, just keep an eye out for that. I send those out on Wednesdays. And then if you're not on that, but you want to be, I'll put a link and we can get you signed up for that. But yeah, I will be, and I'm going to specifically ask for a success story from somebody who had tried it a lot of times and who couldn't get it. So look forward to that. Alrighty, so let's answer another question. When do you feel comfortable starting reintroductions? Okay, so I already talked a lot about that. I think I answered that. If you have any other questions on that, let me know, and I'll work on a reintroductions video in the coming weeks as well. Oh, another hi. I feel like I eat a lot on AIP and I'm always hungry. Is this normal? Oh, such a good question. I love this question. Oh, such a good question. Okay, so I found that I eat a lot more food when I eat AIP, when I eat like unprocessed, when I eat whole foods, nutrient dense foods. The quantity of food I eat is a lot. I think I surprise a lot of people by how much food I eat. With that said, some things that helped me. Well, number one, make sure that you're macro balancing your meals, making sure that you're eating healthy fats, protein, and carbs in the form of veggies at every meal. If you're only eating like carbs and you're not eating your protein, carbs in the form of veggies, and you're not eating a protein or a healthy fat, then you're going to feel hungrier because carbs in the form of veggies, other carbs, are the quickest burning source of fuel, whereas healthy fats help us feel more satiated, more full. They're a much slower burning source of fuel for our bodies. So if you're already doing that, if you're like, hey Shanna, I'm doing that, I'm eating fats at every meal, protein at every meal, carbs in the form of veggies at every meal, I would try to eat more starchy carbs, like make sure you're eating more like butternut squash and sweet potatoes and more like starchy carbs. If you're already doing that too, then I would start to play around with your macronutrient ratio. You can start tracking it on something like Chronometer, which is a free tracking. They have a free version, a tracking website. But I would start tracking on Chronometer or an app like that. Then you can just start experimenting with like your macronutrient ratios. Maybe try eating more healthy fats, more protein, and then also you could always work with your functional medical doctor, your naturopath, your medical team, if you have a nutritional therapy practitioner, and they can help you with that too. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you liked it. Go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Comment, let me know a little bit about your AIP experience, your journey. I'd love to hear. It's always fun to read about each other's experiences. While you're down there, please hit subscribe. I publish new videos every week, and I hope you have an amazing week.